Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz, and I'm doing today's presentation on nurturing reason. This presentation is from my book, Love is Deeper Than Words. There's a chapter in this book called Contemplation and Little Wonders. I began the first section of discussing it, and I titled it Nurturing Humility. And today's presentation is going to continue with nurturing reason. I will walk you through the slides. I did a PowerPoint. I wanted to kind of make sure that it kind of comes together and flows very well. I wanted to use the help of visual aids. It helps to kind of like wait as I'm going through one slide to the next. And this can help us to sort of like reflect on what I'm referring to as reason, because a lot of times people think arguing is reason. People think fallacies are reason. And sometimes people mistake conjecture or rationalization as reason. So I want to, like, if you could just walk with me slide by slide to help you to differentiate between what does it mean to be engaged in reason versus like the facade, or if you will, you know how we say, like, from a faith level, we say there is, the spiritual aspect, the hidden reality of something, and then the image of something. Well, it's the same thing with reason. There's the image of reason, which a lot of times I think people tend to be fooled by, and there's the reality of reason. You know, it's depth and its spirit of how reason really takes place and unfolds. A lot of times what I find is that people confuse, again, reason with conjecture, reason with fallacies, reason with just arguing, or in some intellectual argument, and they assume that they're reasoning by the mere fact that they're just throwing garbage at you, if you will. So I want to start by saying the bee does not waste time trying to persuade the fly that honey is preferable to garbage. So slander is not an argument. Mockery is not an argument. I'll address that. A lot of things that we are assuming is reason or arguing, or like we think that we are like we're opening the doors for intellectual freedom, is actually just garbage. We're really just saying regurgitate or throw out your dirty garbage, you know, or your dirty laundry in the public square. So there's a difference, again, between reason and between all of the stuff that I am mentioning. Similar, like there's a difference between honey and there's a difference between garbage. And the bee is attracted to honey or makes honey, whereas the fly prefers garbage or trash. But we have to separate the two. The fly can be a fly and seek out what it's attracted to, and the bee needs to be the bee and seek out what it's attracted to. But here we need to differentiate between reason and other processes that people are engaged in, but are not reason. They're actually the image of reason, but in reality, it's garbage. I'd like to start with another verse in the Quran, and I highlighted some parts of this verse that I'd like you to think about. Here, I looked at the translation of Asad, Muhammad Asad. I preferred his translation of the slide. Behold, it is truly noble discourse conveyed unto man, which none but the pure of heart can touch, a revelation from the sustainer of all the worlds. Would you now look down with disdain on a tiding like this and make it your daily bread, as it were to call the truth a lie. This is from chapter 56, verses 77, 82. It's a well-guarded divine writ, something that I hope this presentation will point out, and which none but the pure of heart can touch. I like this understanding that unless you allow the message to reach your heart, and it can only reach your heart if your heart is pure, you're not going to fully understand and benefit yourself, kind of like the Bida, and benefit others with its sound arguments, as well as its reason that it has layers upon layers within the Quran, and make it your daily bread, as it were, to call truth a lie. And as I said, a lot of times calling truth a lie, it comes under the disguise of being reason or free speech or freedom, when it's actually just spreading disinformation, misinformation, slander, toxic, manipulation tactics. But it's really, there's a benefit to it from those who spread it. There's some profit that they make, but it's something that we have to put out there, that if we are going to be using reason, we have to be aware of those realities that exist, and we have to be aware of how to differentiate one from the other. How do we differentiate, for example, evidence and signs versus, garbage? There are many verses in the Quran, but I just focused on these because these will be kind of like the aim of my presentation. The Quran invites people to reason. It's not inviting you to blind faith or to just jump into something just because or just in case there's a God. Now, I have another chapter in the Quran that touches on other areas like proofs and witnesses, but I won't delve into that here. I will delve into that more in that particular chapter. Here, it's again the process of reason and how it is unlike other processes which people assume that they're engaged in reason, but that the Quran itself encourages and invites people to reason. Indeed, the worst of living creatures in the sight of Allah are the deaf and dumb who do not use reason. Here we're talking about, again, not physical disability of being deaf or even the physical disability of being dumb. Those are actually not called to account for these issues. I'm referring to, again, you have the physical capacity to listen, to let the message reach you, and to think it through, but you prefer garbage. So again, do they do not use reason? In chapter 7, verse 179, they have hearts which they do not understand. Again, the heart is not pure. They have eyes with which they do not see. They have ears which they do not hear. They are like livestock. Rather, they are more astray. It is they who are heedless. Again, that the faculties of reason, being able to see and listen and measure the signs, are all around us and helping us to understand some of the messages of the Quran and let it reach our heart. In another chapter, chapter 41, verse 53, we will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. Everybody has a particular understanding of certain life events, and my understanding is at times God gives power to certain individuals. It is not because he's with them or he supports what they do or what they're coming up with. I believe, personally, my interpretation, God is trying to guide them by allowing them, giving them the reins to go out, use the power that they have and witness with their own eyes, just like he gave Pharaoh, witness with your own eyes the signs all around you, all the way in the horizons, within yourselves, like do all of these research until it becomes clear that it is the truth. So doesn't mean that Muslims are not involved in these things, but sometimes if we see other individuals more involved and more like engaged in some of these research, that just means that God wants to guide them by themselves without like having like being kind of always second to the Muslims or something. It's not a threat to Muslims to see other people discover it, because our aim here is to work towards elevating and allowing the truth to emerge. It may be this is God guiding them to witness the truth by their own experimentation, by their own scientific work and study to help bring it to them as clear as day. It is a true message. Chapter 29, verse 20, say, O Muhammad, travel through the land and observe how he began creation. Then Allah will produce the final creation. Indeed, Allah over all things is competent. Again, reason, travel, study, look at how creation began. As I mentioned in the previous video, Nurturing Humility, about how people need to go and travel and see the signs all around them. They need to see and study the creation around them. And I gave many scholars who encouraged the reflection, the contemplation on nature and creation. And if you visit other lands, don't just go to the shops and the clubs or wherever it is that you like to go when you visit. Go and see the history. Go and see even the different type of creation that are there. Go and see, like as I said, when we went to Turkey, we went to Hierapolis and other areas. Go and see some historical sites and allow the Quran to engage you when you do so, because it has many arguments that engage people about the history of the world that we are in. Finally, again, there's many verses, but these are the ones that I chose. See, I only advise you one thing, that you stand before Allah in pairs and individually, and then give thought. Again, I showed that in the video with Reuben, who himself actually acted on this particular verse where he, stood there having this kind of discourse with God about what was troubling him, what was discomforting him, as well as how he used reason. You can have, for example, areas where you're not aware, where you don't understand, but he used reason and he engaged people. And even when he was still not convinced, he was owning up to that he was not convinced and turning to God with what it is that he was struggling with. And God, throughout the whole process, was guiding him. But as you could see, he put that kind of in action, that particular verse, that he was with others and with himself, contemplating, give thought, that he was trying to contemplate this message that he was exploring and researching. And likewise, we also have to be in that same process. Now, in this particular verse, now they are bent on denying the truth. Again, here it's about talking about internal reality of some individuals who don't like the truth, because the truth, if it emerges, they stand to lose. If it emerges, they stand to lose power, they stand to lose status, they stand to lose money. So a lot of times you see that fight that takes place, that collision between individuals. On the surface level, they will identify it as, X colliding with Y. But if one really looks at it more in depth and, just with the lens of the way the Quran teaches us to use reason, you will find that it has more to do with denying the truth, because the truth, if it emerged, they will end up losing. As I said, started off with the very first verse, they will end up losing a lot of their money and a lot of their, we're not talking about like losing your job. We're talking about here like billionaires and, industries that are really like their money that they don't really need to survive, like their next day or their even year, but just the aim really is about greed, is what I'm trying to get at. That they're denying the truth out of greed, out of like desires, not a desire to survive, because we all want to survive. We all want to be able to eat and drink and be safe. Those are basic, survival needs. I'm talking about greed here. When I speak about money, I'm speaking about greed. So why has not the Quran been bestowed on him from high in one single revelation? This is an argument that they raised, and here is the response. And here I'm trying to point out reason. It has been revealed in this manner, so that we might strengthen thy heart thereby, for we have so arranged its component parts that they form one consistent whole, and they who deny the truth might never taunt thee with any deceptive half-truth, without our conveying to thee the full truth and providing thee with the best explanation. One of the hardest things when you try to I worked on this project, and I love this verse for that reason. I worked on this project for a very, very long time, Then when I tried to bring it out, but then I came across this verse too, is when you try to bring something out just even slightly, you start to see all of these conjecture about what you're writing about without fully identifying. And at that time, I remember when I started bringing it out, I had assumed that all I have to do is just, give one declarative, like say, no, this not, and then it ends. But no, actually, people started to even collude with each other and come up with more deceptive half-truth, and collude with each other and come up with more deceptive half-truth. And I learned from that when I came to this verse, just the difficulty that if the Quran came down all at one time, that the message would not have been met in the same way as if it had come layer by layer by layer. What God shows us when it came down layer by layer by layer is those who are open to receiving the truth and having the message touch their heart, like the bees, and those who are denying the truth, who are hell-bent on denying the truth, who regard every time they come up with an explanation or conjecture, then God sends down another revelation, which is a better explanation of what happened. They turn around, come up with more, again, garbage. And then he sends, more revelation to further strengthen, and then they come up with more garbage. But as this is happening, this is something that I also experienced. Your heart becomes strengthened with faith, that what you assume, like on the outside, they have their degrees and they have their way of arguing, that is totally not at all reason. It's conjecture, it's assumptions, it's manipulation tactics. And it strengthens your hearts that over time, as more revelation is coming and they start to scurry around with all of this, conjecture, you're like, my heart is so strengthened now that, your manipulation tactics and your conjecture tactics no longer work. They don't, not that they work before, but, you always have that murmur, because they present their argument like it's reason and it's intellectualism. But then, you realize as you're presenting your project, how a lot of it is just conjecture, half-truth, disinformation, misinformation, foolishness. And likewise, as the Quran is coming down, I'm just giving you a small little example, but it's, obviously the Prophet faced it different. And you're seeing all these individuals joining forces to fight and respond, and it comes down and further strengthens the hearts of the believers. And in a way, it kind of reveals the reality again of those who are denying the truth, that they don't have really a sound argument. And I'll show some examples. They don't really have evidence. They don't even have a desire to know the truth. It's just all the image, again, the image of reason, because they will be using the words reason, they will be using the words intellectuals, but it's all an image of reason. It is not the true processes of the mind, true processes of the heart, true processes of listening and thinking and giving thought, true processes of reason. So there is the image and there is the reality. And as it comes down in small, layers upon small layers, nurturing the community, preparing the community's heart to fully receive, not just until, on their backs, but to fully receive such that their nature, their being changes. And they receive this message and are able to bring it forth. So this is, again, the importance of this particular verse. By emphasizing humility, the Quran reminds us to approach knowledge and understanding with an open mind, free from arrogance, preconceived notions. Furthermore, it teaches us that rational thinking and critical analysis are essential tools in seeking the truth, guiding us toward a more balanced and thoughtful approach to life's complexities. He it is who sent down to thee the book. In it are verses basic or fundamental of established meaning. They are the foundation of the book. Others are allegorical. They're not clear, they're metaphorical. But those in whose hearts is perversity follow the parts thereof that is allegorical, seeking discord. Again, seeking discord and searching for its hidden meanings, not seeking the truth, not seeking to understand. And I gave examples of that, not seeking to verify, but seeking discord, searching for its hidden meanings, but no one knows its hidden meanings except Allah. And those who are firmly grounded in knowledge say, we believe in the book. The whole of it is from our Lord. And none will grasp the message except men of understanding. Reason, one of the things that people who use reason do not do is if they like to use their mind, they don't like their mind to use them. And what does that mean? Like if they sense they don't have sufficient evidence to engage, or to conclude or come up with an understanding about a particular issue, they don't touch it. It's something that people who use reason, they don't like things that are not clear. They avoid things that are not clear, or coming up with an understanding about something that is not clear. If something looks, to be there's like a half truth that it's sent down, and the necessary information that they need to be able to come up to a decisive understanding regarding this particular issue, they don't touch it. They will just say, Allah knows. I don't really have sufficient knowledge or sufficient evidence or a particular issue that I need to be able to judge a particular situation. But they will use their mind very strongly and powerfully on things you have sufficient evidence, sufficient clarity on a particular matter. The Quran in certain areas is very, very strong, very, very clear, using the commanding voice, regarding certain things about our faith. You will find their minds working there. Other individuals, their mind, again, and it's all about creating discords. It's all about creating discord. And I will show you again. So there's a perversity in their hearts. On the outside, it looks like, again, they're having all these talks and talks and talks and talks, and they're engaging each other, and they want the truth to come out. But really all they're doing is amplifying disinformation, misinformation, slander, they're amplifying nonsense, and they're really kind of, if you will, like if you can imagine like a mudslide coming and burying like the truth underneath. That's all really what they're doing. And so they're not really engaging in reasonable processes of the mind and even like all our intellectual faculties to be able to arrive at truth. It's important to understand, do I have sufficient knowledge? Do I have sufficient understanding regarding particular issue to make a conclusive, even like hypothesis or understanding? So it's important to keep that in mind, because a person who's using reason will say, you know, what I am ignorant of is greater than what I know regarding this particular issue, so I'm not going to touch it. What I am ignorant of is greater than, but I have knowledge of this issue, so I am not going to touch it. There's a lot of omission in that particular situation. Just not going to touch it. They don't touch, again, half truth. They just stick back and they say, I really don't know. I don't have the sufficient evidence that I need to be able to come up with an understanding regarding this situation. Something important for us to understand. God always allows falsehood or half-truth to speak regardless who resists it. As we are seeing, you know, yes, there are some individuals and there are Muslims, and there's a reason, out of faith reason, that they don't want falsehood, the amplification of falsehood. And I'll mention here how at times they present it as free speech, when in reality, it's not free speech. It's really the amplification of slander, garbage, and nonsense, and burying the truth underneath. So the Quran came in stages, shedding a little light. Some responded like the angels. Instead of conjecturing or defying, they clarified, verified, confirmed. They willingly surrendered. Khadija and Abu Bakr are an example. May God be pleased with them. Others started to defy, as I said, conjecture and rationalize. The more revelations came to explain God's earlier revelation. In this way, people were nurtured to understand how not just, again, the revelation, but how human beings rationalize and conjecture good sounding arguments that are pure falsehood. This way you are strengthened and strengthened and strengthened within when you see them live acting in this sort of like, you know, what is the word here? Energizing each other in the promotion of falsehoods. Over time, those who were struggling began to realize this is a book from God that nurtured human beings to use reason. Okay, so this does not in any way say blindly just believe. Use reason. It wants you to have strong conviction in the message. People who have a disease in their heart, have perverse souls, are addicted to conjecture. As I said, there's the bees and there's the flies. They're addicted to conjecture or mystery. While those whose hearts are clean and pure, they avoid such matters, as I mentioned over and over again. In the Quran, God shed light on people who follow and are addicted to conjecture or mystery. It's repeated again in many perspectives and stories throughout the Quran. So I do recommend that you reflect on those passages in the Quran to help you reflect on, again, the difference between reason and between the image of reason. And so you might think like, you know, they have these phenomenal intellectual arguments when really they're engaging in fallacies. It helps one to see those who are, again, true to God from those who are false themselves, as the shared passage ends. And no one will be reminded except those of understanding. So if you are seeking to understand, you love to understand, you want to really grasp this message and understand it, then this will start to click in as you're seeing it unfold and you're bearing witness to it. And you're seeing again how people are claiming to be in love with reason, but in reality, it's the image of reason. Here I'll touch on like some of the things that we've all witnessed. This is a sign for all of us to witness, just to further confirm what I'm referring to. A lot of times, like under free speech or freedom, what have we seen? Endless mockery of Prophet Muhammad in all parts of the world where people do not want to see Islam emerge or practiced. So mockery is a confession of lack of conviction and insecurities regarding one's belief. Shows that you really don't have a sound argument. You probably don't even know what a sound argument is, but you want to sound big and you want the person that you disagree with, you want them to feel small. And so you resort to mockery. Why? Because I need you to feel small for me to feel great. And I don't have a sound argument regarding what you're presenting on the table. So for me, I am going to go ahead and mock, to keep you small and to keep huffing and puffing about a false sense of who I am. These are people, again, on the outside, it looks like we're free and we're presenting freedom of speech. But again, there's the bee and there's the fly. In reality, is they're energizing themselves and they're putting mud over the truth. That's all they're doing, mud over the truth. So something to reflect, because we all observed this and we saw the argument that it, was used to promote it, which is, again, free speech, freedom of expression. There is conviction, as I mentioned, yaqeen, and there is attachment, a humiliating love that enslaves another. There is faith, and there is desire. And how do you distinguish, these things apart? One approach promotes reason. Faith promotes reasons. I showed you some verses from the Quran, while other relies on shame, brainwashing to manipulate people into compliance. The first method advocates for critical thinking and logical analysis, empowering individuals to make informed decisions based on facts and reasoning. Conversely, the second tactic employs techniques that limit independent thoughts and use emotional manipulation to coerce and compel individuals into adopting a specific ideology or belief system. And I have chapters in my book which discuss some of those emotional or manipulative tactics. Where do those who disagree with Islamic teachings have power? Mostly like Western nations. We're talking about, and did we not observe this following phenomena over and over and over again with the mockery of Prophet Muhammad upon him peace and blessings? And so we did. We experienced it over and over, either mocking the Quran or mocking, again, Prophet Muhammad. But if you were to ask about how much the Quran and Prophet Muhammad was discussed, how many of these individuals even know the basic facts, measurable facts about Prophet Muhammad or the Quran? If you were to do as they heard of Prophet Muhammad, they can recall some of the stereotypes and mockery, but can they recall any of the basic fundamental facts about Prophet Muhammad, his message or mission? And the answer is no. So then how could we say that we are engaged in reason? If free speech amplifies, in societies where free speech is celebrated, it amplifies this information over the truth, then we need to, again, have a discussion on the freedom of speech and freedom of expression. If it amplifies nonsense and mockery over reason, then we need to have a discussion about freedom of speech, because this is the issue that is aimed at here. It's not about I disagree with you, I don't have evidence, you don't have evidence, here's my argument. It's simply that the way the disagreement is presented through the image of freedom, through the image of reason, when all it really is just garbage, heaped up and energized, heaped up over the truth and pushing the truth down. So we need to reflect on that. And the Quran tells us to push the truth and have it come up. Like, as I said, the one of the things the reformer does is he removes like the pile of mud upon the pile of mud, and he allows, or she allows, the truth to emerge. Now, Islam is the beauty of it. Again, why emphasize this reason? Islam does not recommend that process of mockery. Now, some Muslims have mocked. In fact, when this particular verse that I'm addressing to you here came about, it was actually Muslims who used mockery towards other individuals of other faith. And they came to Prophet Muhammad and they said, if they do this, they mock our faith, our gods, we will also start responding with similar mockery. And the revelation came down to support this understanding. And it told, in fact, it taught again, and it nurtured Muslims. Don't revile those deities. Mockery is not an argument. Muslims have and do at times use mockery, again, because they're not exploring their faith. They're not trying to investigate it to strengthen their heart. They're not letting the message touch their heart. They're feeling their egos bruised, or they're made to feel small. So then they need other individuals to feel small. They're like, well, I need you to feel small, then I need you to feel small. And it becomes into who can make the other feel smaller in their eyes. So God responds that for goodly indeed have we made their own doings appear unto every community. In time, however, unto thy sustainer they must return, and then he will make them truly understand all that they were doing. Now they swear by God with their most solemn oath that if a miracle were shown to them, they would indeed believe in this divine writ. Saying miracles are in the power of God alone. Like, this is to let you know that the prophets could not produce miracles on their own. They could not even provoke God to say, give me a miracle. For all you know, even if one should be shown to them, they would not believe. And I mentioned this in the Nurturing Humility video about how God will show you signs upon signs upon signs via miracles, and then he will test you. And again, instead of going like the bee with honey, you go in the way of the fly toward garbage. And I gave examples, not just of the children of Israel, but also during Jesus' time. Sign, miracle after miracle after miracle, where things they witnessed, they saw. Again, here we're talking about clear. They needed more miracles, then where they did not witness, where things appeared to them, but there was no clarity. Remember, I talked about here, things are just not clear. The emissions are greater than ignorance. The issues that you're ignorant of, the emissions are greater than the facts. They went ahead and then started to spread as a false understanding of Jesus, and so that message then went through. So it's a warning for us Muslims that try, as I have shown from various individuals, try to understand and receive this message and let it reach your heart. That is the biggest sign from your Lord, because God gives us signs that we can measure, not for us to use our minds to measure God. So some has asked for more Quranic evidence again on my Arguments in Nurturing Humility video, and I encourage them to read the Quran. And this is from the chapter 6. You could also read other chapters like chapter 4. Start with the passage on this chapter. You will understand the argument on nurturing humility and the miracles witnessed by the followers of Moses, the followers of Jesus, and others, that even if it was shown, like I'll show in the future chapters with Prophet Abraham, when they saw with their own eyes the fire burned him. That didn't burn him, excuse me, he was thrown into the fire. Even with that miracle, they still did not believe. Something to note, though, is that why a purified messenger? Say none in the heavens on earth except Allah knows what is hidden, nor can they perceive when they shall be raised up for judgment. Dr. Mustafa Mahmoud mentioned, when people plot and plan, as I mentioned, it is to hide the truth. You know, under the false image of things, they energize each other and they throw mud on the truth and they try to hide the truth. Whereas when God plots and plans, it is to manifest the truth that is hidden. On my YouTube channel, in the video Turning to God as Our Witness, I explain the importance of truth seekers to certify what they are experiencing, and we have already created man and know what his soul whispers to him, and we are closer to him than his jugular vein. This is in chapter 50, verse 16. The video, again, by Rubin, it caught my eye because it kind of followed these processes that, that of being nurtured into guidance, not, again, looking for miracles, although he did ask in the video about miracles, but he didn't receive them. Because in his heart, it's like God says in this verse, we create man and we know what his soul whispers to him. So although on the outside, he's saying he's looking for a miracle, in his heart, what he's really researching is he wants certification that this is indeed a message from God. Given, again, the experiences of his life, because he grew up as an atheist, God already knew what is troubling him. And so he helped guide his steps and helped him walk through the feelings that he had by presenting people to him that could answer his question. And even during this time when he's looking for a miracle, you know, assuming, because a lot of people think that miracles, not just non-Muslims, but Muslims think miracles means that it will strengthen our faith. But a lot of times when God sends miracles, and the Quran mentions, people still do not believe. And so he helped guide him through that process, not to look for miracles, but to use his reason and to study the message, use his reason, his faculties of reason, and to study the creation, all the various signs around him, and to reflect on the difference between rationalization and conjecture. If he sent you a miracle like a bird, like he was asking, like, well, at least show me, like, you know, something like a thunderbolt or, you know, a bird flying somewhere, that would just be a coincidence. It's not really an act of that you should be looking for. You should be looking for things that you can study, you could measure, you could present to others, because we cannot do miracles for people. We need them to be able, however, to investigate, to go throughout the earth and investigate things. So we must always verify our thoughts and feelings with the source of truth, the Quran. And so that was the response that came to him, was again turning him back to the Quran. In communication, we always want the sender and receiver to be certified. Therefore, when we experience God in our lives, we desire to have that experience certified so that transmission is not distorted between sender and receiver. Excuse me. The Quran wasn't sent down to everyone, because if it was sent down all at once to everyone, not everyone will be able to receive it in the same way. Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, the society at the time recognized him as for his truthfulness, his honesty, his trustworthiness. He was certified by his community at that level. He was certified when he first received revelation by somebody who was a known, for example, Zahid, you know, somebody who was known for his knowledge as well as his piety, when he started to first speak about the message. Khadijah was able to certify, given how he lived with her and how she had, you know, lived with him over all of these years. So you can research again that information. Likewise, in our communication, we must certify our arguments with the Quran. The Quran has very powerful arguments. Hence, do not defer to the likes and the dislikes of those who deny the truth. And a lot of times that's what we do. They mock, we mock back. They mock, we mock back. But strive hard against them by means of this divine writ. Study the arguments in the Quran first for yourself. Let it touch your heart. So strive with this divine writ with utmost striving. This is the important part. You know, I had this little video. I'm not going to let it play for you to hear it, but I'll let it play just for you if you can. See what I mean, why a purified messenger, how the message becomes diluted over time. So here individuals are standing in line. Everyone is kind of like looking to their back of the one before them, you see. And then each one gives the message to the one in front of them. So they'll tap the person on the shoulders, he turns around and he passes that same message, just using, again, information. It's a great example of miscommunication, but you could see people interpret what they receive based on what's in their heart. Doesn't necessarily mean to be bad, but everybody interprets things based on what's in their heart. So you could see people are starting to laugh because they're noticing the receiver, there's no certification process. The receiver is just assuming and taking on a distorted message and passing it on. And this one distorts it further and passes it on. And that one distorts it further and passes it on. I want to stop here, not to play the whole thing, it's a few minutes, but I'll put the link again in my YouTube description. I would encourage you to look at the whole thing, but it's an example of, again, why a purified messenger, his heart was purified, is able to receive the message from, you know, the angel, purified angels who received the message from God. And then his assignment was to purify the hearts of those around him so that they can receive the message and let it touch their hearts. It's an honorable discourse, which none but those of pure hearts can touch. So those hearts had to be purified for it to touch our hearts, touch our being, so that we can also take it on to the next, again, individuals. But we must make sure that we, those who are talking here to Muslims, are also, our hearts are pure when we let that message touch our heart, that we're not pushing out also a distorted message of the Quran. So we must strive with great striving for against our ego, as well as engaging others about truthfulness of this message. I had to stop and just remove part of the presentation. I have done this presentation more than once trying to record it, and I was told I could like record it via PowerPoint, but then when I tried to export the video, it didn't come out well. So parts of that export I had to remove because I forgot to remove some of it from the presentation slide. So in this particular verse, and mention the day he will gather them and that which they worship besides Allah, and will say, did you mislead these my servants, or did they themselves stray from the way? They will say, exalted are you, it was not for us to take besides you any allies, but you provided comforts for them and their fathers until they forgot the message and become a people void. Here God is mentioning about, again, using reason. If you can see it directly, I'll give you some examples. Recently, like an individual who's a popular, famous individual who was showing that on AI, somebody went and took his voice, impersonating him and promoting whatever thing on Instagram. This is not just recent day. We experienced in our life journey, I'll mention that when I talk about false accusations, where somebody forged sheriff's signature, they forged a notary public, they forged, other key figures, authority figures to be able to promote. It had to deal with some issues that some family members were facing, but to again be able to win whatever issue that he wanted to win, and to provide, to use like forgery of many authority type figures. During the time of Ali and Uthman, somebody went and took like the seal of Uthman. God be pleased with them both, Ali and Uthman, and they tried to fabricate a story which created, again, discord. Remember, they said seeking discord, and again trying to, if you will, spread falsehood. The same thing, like, for all the prophets that they had faced, is some individuals will come to try to mislead others by making false claims. So this is not something new. This is not something recent, just with AI, just with some individuals that they've experienced. This is something that is the beginning of humanity, is people will forge and impersonate whatever tools is available for them. It'll just make it more easier to do these things, but they will impersonate, and they will fabricate, and they will, forge. So it's important. God is teaching us, me and you, is when we are looking at people quoting Jesus, and people quoting Moses, and people quoting all of these important figures who carried the message. We must verify, did they indeed say these things? Did they indeed promote this understanding of the message? That is what's using reason. Be aware of false accusations. Be aware of forgery. Be aware of someone impersonating others. Be aware of someone taking the seal, like, taking the notary public seal, and using it to falsify and mislead. Be aware of that reality that human beings do and have done and continue to do over time, and verify. Again, the importance of verify, clarify, confirm, that certification process. That's the whole issue about seeking God, the witness. Be aware of that. Don't just receive and push out. You must receive, clarify, verify, confirm, because your aim is to seek understanding and to ensure that you receive the message with clarity and with genuine understanding. So they will say, these individuals are going to be accused, or were carrying the message beforehand, they will say, that exalted are you, it was not for us to take besides them and their fathers, it was not for us to take besides you any allies, but you provided comforts for them and their fathers until they forgot the message and became a people ruined. So this is something for us, again, to reflect on when we are engaging other individuals and they quote somebody important figure that we may both revere. The argument that we need to put on the table is, did these individuals say this particular message, or was this a distorted understanding of the message that was not verified and confirmed by these individuals? We come here now to, some people try to contemplate the Almighty, but the prophet said to them, contemplate the creation of God and not God himself, for you can never give him his due. So it's very important, again, about reason, is that, God's greatness, is cannot, like our mind cannot grasp his tremendous greatness to its full context. We cannot do that. What we can, however, do is we can use our minds to measure and judge the signs that God brings about to us. In the Quran, God is, communicates some of the attributes, the names, as well as the creation that he wants us to reflect on and to be able to understand his greatness, how he creates the harmony, the many things, the intelligence that we see around us. Through those contemplations of his creation, to be able to understand him as the creator, to understand him as, again, al-musawwir, the designer also. There are many names of God, 99, and some of them, even there are some that we do not know. But by contemplating the creation, we could see through history and through what the signs around us, some of the beauty of God. So is faith blind? Because we are not, we're asking to see God as a sign. Is faith then blind because we don't see him? Or are we asked to use reason and critical thinking when contemplating the invisible? We often ignore, again, apparent signs and chase after unknown, supernatural, and mysterious. This is illogical and it's not rational. Contemplation of the invisible and its limits. There's a limitation on contemplating the divine being himself, since none but God knows himself. We don't speak for God, but convey what he shared about himself. We don't interpret his inner reality, as only he knows this knowledge. Even prophets do not know, as Jesus upon him peace said, I do not know what is within yourself. This is science, critical thinking, and reason. We can't even guess the inner reality of others, as the brain remains a mystery to scientists. When we tried, we created more harm than good. Case in point, for example, is, again, bring back that verse in the Quran that I mentioned about the scripture, but it's also with the science as well. There are things that are clear. There are things that are not very clear. Where we have clarity, and these are like two psychologists. One is Dr. Alice Lowe Serio, and another is Dr. J. Wesley Boyd. They wrote, we will not spy on our patients. We don't read minds. Again, the psychologist fallacy. And we know that none of us can predict the future. So here, these are intelligent, psychologists. They recognize, again, the limits of psychology. The limits of psychology is where things are present to you that you could measure. Like they gave an example. If someone said, I'm going to kill X, Y, Z, then we could use that and work with that as evidence of this person wanting to kill X, Y, Z. But telling us to use the field of psychology, like where's the psychologist fallacy, to read other people's minds, that is the psychologist fallacy. That's, again, where the people who have perversity in their hearts, whether it is scripture, or whether it is science, it's the same way. Whereas things are as clear as day, they will avoid, or they will not even look into. And you'll see people will say things such as that they want to kill, they will not even take action, but they will obsess where things are not clear. And I don't know if you've been on Instagram where you have watched through some of these videos where someone will say 10 signs of a liar, 7 signs of a liar, 11 signs of a liar, 20 signs of a liar. And if you just compile all of them together, literally just put all these signs together, thinking that you could tell who's a liar, who's not a liar. They don't look at basic facts and truth, like this person said this, here's evidence they said this. No, they're like, twitched his nose, did his eye, looked this way, did that way, walked around, all of this, all type of human diverse, human reactions and actions, they took that as signs of a liar. So it basically comes off as, I had an argument with you. I don't have evidence, so I'm just going to misrepresent you as a liar. I'm going to study about your habits, your way you engage, and take that and say, here are signs of a liar. Again, this is, people who have perversity in them. They go over things that are not clear to seek discord. Instead of saying, I have a disagreement with somebody, we're not able to really resolve this issue. We need to agree to disagree and just move on. If we're not able to face each other, let's just move on. That is the healthier issue. Again, as they said, these particular psychologists, we don't read minds. Likewise, not just for psychology, but for faith, we don't read God's mind. We cannot interpret his divine plan. We can only, based on what he gave us in the Quran, read the message, use our minds to reflect on that message that he gave us. We can't reflect on the invisible, which what he didn't give us, but what he gave us and the various signs around us, which are clear for us to measure, touch, feel, taste, that we can, again, using science, be able to use our faculties of reason and extract what benefits us, kind of like the bee, and benefit others. One person's freedom of expression is another person's emotional intoxicant manipulation or emotional abuse. Sometimes people accuse Islamic teachings of inhibiting freedom of expression, and there are some Muslims who do that. I'm not here in denial. But again, we're looking at the full story, the whole story. What happens when people make these accusations is they focus on some individuals who are Muslims in one particular part of the world or other parts of the world, and they take that and they go into making sweeping generalizations about all Muslims across history, across time, across places. And so now it's it's not just in that limited, like, for example, the issue with hijab in Iran. No, now it's in the same issue is now they accuse, it's an issue within Indonesia, Malaysia, wherever Muslims are at, they're all facing the same issue, which is not true. Again, they take one issue and they go into sweeping generalizations. And again, all of the numerous permutations of fallacies to push forth a particular deception or half-truth, and to be able, again, to cover up the truth. They can't say there's an issue here with the way Iran dealt with this particular case or other cases in Iran regarding women wearing hijab, and Iran needs to be challenged not to resort to these type of ways of promoting hijab, like using violence, using tyranny, that needs to be challenged not to go in that direction. No, we don't. You bring forth reasonable argument. We start to hype up the entire world, even those who are non-Muslims and don't like Islam and don't like Prophet Muhammad, again, the mockery of Prophet Muhammad, then it all comes in and everyone starts energized and hyping each other up. It becomes like looking for garbage to, again, throw over the garbage that we threw before so that we can win an argument. Not because we're looking for ways that we can coexist and then engage each other with what we are convinced about, helping us to see the truth, which we are convinced is the truth for ourselves. So again, some accuse Islamic teachings of inhibiting free expressions. Essential to listen to the argument raised and respond with what we know about manipulation. The opposing perspective is that Islam values the soul and it aims to preserve the mind, which is a gift from God from exploitation. I shared, again, many examples throughout my book, so I won't present them here, but in later chapters when I discuss them, you will be able to see that. Islamic law, for example, prohibits alcohol, drugs, and substances that impair the mind. Now, people always, whenever you try to talk about Islamic law, they'll bring in the exceptions of abuse or the exceptions of like some medical issues. And again, rules are based on the norm. Even like in coding, whenever we code, there is the norm, and then we have exception handling. So rules are based on the norm, and then there's exception handling. Those are isolated cases that do not fit into the norm. That teaches, again, critical thinking. But rules themselves are based on the norm. And every norm, there is exceptions to that norm. but exceptions to that norm has exceptions handling situations. But when we look at the rules, we're looking at the norm to understand them. So I'm not going to be discussing exceptions here. I'm just trying to highlight again the norm, which is that Islam prohibits drinking drugs, because why? Once again, to promote the faculties of the usage of the faculties of reason and to protect our soul from being like misjudging or the misuse of our reason that might end up bringing us harm or bringing others harm. While freedom of expression is crucial, critical thinking and rational decision-making takes priority. On an emotional level, certain activities may be perceived as freedom of expression, but are prohibited due to their potential to impede the mind's capacity for sound reasoning. By restricting those activities that hinder the mind's ability to think critically, we can guarantee a more well-rounded and discerning approach to freedom of expression. For example, secularism teaches we don't let our friends drive drunk. Islam teaches we don't let our friends drink. These principles are rooted again in the teachings of Islam, which emphasize the importance of maintaining a clear and sound state of mind. The aim again is to protect ourselves, not just from physical intoxicants, but also from emotional intoxicants. And we know, like at times when these drinking takes place, or even like certain freedom of expressions take place, like mockery or others, what happens is, again, you are engaging in emotional intoxicants that they're classic techniques. This is again shared by Noam Chomsky in 10 strategies of manipulation. And what is happening in that particular situation is that you make use of the emotional aspect. It's a classic technique, causes short circuit on the rational analysis, and finally to the critical sense of the individual. Furthermore, the use of the emotional register to open the door to unconscious for implantation, grafting ideas, desires, fears, and anxieties, compulsions, or induced behaviors. So some of the things which may be perceived as freedom of expression are actually manipulation tactics that end up harming individuals. So something for us to reflect on. So this proactive approach promotes responsible conduct and fosters a community that prioritizes the well-being of individuals, both physically and emotionally. So it may be perceived that Islam inhibits, again, freedom of expression, but if we understand how manipulation works, and I have chapters that will discuss these issues and how the psychological fallacy works, actually what Islam is doing is, again, protecting and nurturing the subconscious from implantation for grafting ideas, desires, fears, anxieties, compulsions, or inducing behaviors that are harmful to oneself and harmful to society. So that is their argument, which is those who disagree with Islamic teachings, that it inhibits freedom of speech. And the Islamic response or counter argument is simply no, there is the process of manipulation. This is not reason, but manipulation. And the way manipulation works is like this. And Islam seeks to protect the mind as well as the subconscious from being manipulated. So this is the counter argument that Islam puts on the table. Now, our recent case, this was in France, very recent case came about. And the discussion, it was about, again, Dabe, kind of wearing like Dabe here. So Dabe, just briefly, is called sometimes, but it's a loose overgarment resembling a robe-like dress, typically worn by women in various regions of the Muslim world. It kind of recognizes a significant part of the Muslim fashion. France wants their schools, free, secular, and compulsory from primary school to the end of high school. And French authorities will be uncompromising. They don't want to allow, for example, if you will, Muslims, like if you want to control a society, you start when they're young, and you start with the grafting of ideas at a very young age. They do not want Muslims, their claim, they don't want them to be stigmatized, Even the president, Emmanuel Macron, said he defended the ban, saying that he doesn't want them to be stigmatized, and he wants to promote the ban against that bay, which is like the recent, again, thing that is going on. When you stigmatize someone, you describe or regard them as worthy of disgrace or great disapproval. So I like wearing that bay. It's comfortable. I don't need somebody who doesn't like wearing it to feel, again, also stigmatized. I personally like wearing it. As I said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You may see it as something that is disgraceful, or might see it as something that is stigmatizing, uncomfortable. However, I have the right for freedom to say, I actually feel this is comfortable. And I don't feel threatened that you don't think this is comfortable for you, but I feel it's comfortable for me. I like wearing it. If you don't like wearing it, I don't have a problem with that, but I like wearing it, and I find that it is comfortable piece of clothing. But what I do know is this clash is not about religion versus liberty, religion versus freedom. This clash is actually a clash of egoism, as I mentioned in other presentation. In this particular situation, it's the recurring collision of freedom and secularism. This is really what this clash is about. It's contradictory that France defends Salman Rushdie's freedom of expression, which is kind of like sensationalism, slander, debauchery, whatever it is, garbage, yet denies women the right to dress how they see fit. They feel comfortable wearing hijab. They feel uncomfortable to, again, see that women are choosing this type of dress code. Now, this raises the question of whether these restrictions are generally for the well-being and agency of women, or they stem from societal biases and the desire to control women's bodies and choices. It's essential to examine the underlying motives behind these measures. As I said in the very first verse when I began this presentation, about people make their livelihood their daily bread, to give truth, to treat the truth as a lie. So if we look at that, whenever sometimes people have an issue with Islamic teachings or have an issue with, we're talking about here greed. We're not talking about basic survival necessities. We're talking about greed. If we really look and see money talks, wherever you go, money talks. And if we are honest, how many business would collapse if Muslim fashion became popular and most women dressed out of health benefits, comfort, and safety rather than to fit in, adopt the latest fashion of the day? I mentioned an article on Facebook when I addressed this issue about just makeup alone. Around $300 billion is the makeup industry. And around close to over $900 billion is the women's apparel industry. And if we also study makeup, scientifically study makeup, a lot of makeup that women put on their face every day has many, many toxic ingredients in the makeup. It is very harmful. I mentioned an article, which I will put on the YouTube with this video presentation, about how people are being poisoned. They're saying we're being poisoned every day. So there's that social pressure, that grafting, again, of desires and behaviors that is actually harmful for our face, harmful for our bodies, but we're being pushed into that just to socially fit in, instead of taking a step back and recognizing that these are harmful products that we are being pressured to put on our face. So is freedom of expression really about freedom to choose given the correct information, or more to do, again, slander, sex, sensualities, sells? It's that idea of talking about greed. not survival necessities of making money to getting a job. Talking about greed. This sells. Sex sells, debauchery sells, and this is what it's really all about. And at a young age, that these women who are impressionable, young girls are impressionable, are not having their minds, again, like implanted with understandings that may induce behaviors and desires that are actually harmful for them, then how can we pretend that we are inhibiting free speech, and Islam is afraid of free speech, it's afraid of criticism, when in reality, we are not being honest that the collision is between freedom and secularism. We are not really addressing the full facts. We are focused on, again, the emissions, we are focused on what's not clear, and we're not allowing the emissions from the arguments where we have the ability to put forth on the table to be put on the table, and for society to receive that information and choose for themselves. Why are some opinions, ideas, and choices banned that are formed by accurate information and verification processes? These limitations are carefully evaluated and justified to avoid valuable perspectives and impeding intellectual growth. In other words, France fears losing not because Muslims took over and made Islam compulsory, the way they're making secularism compulsory, but because deep down, French authorities fear Muslims' argument, what they will bring to the table, the arguments that are there, the facts that are there. And if they were to be presented, that the French might actually adopt Muslim arguments and Muslim understanding of things. So is this what the ban is really all about? If we recall how France responded when they lost the soccer tournament, it's kind of very telling. We can pit groups against each other, keep them fighting, or we can realize those creating the problems and tensions are also solving the problems, increasing them in power, status, and money as well. Here I'm talking about, again, greed, not necessity, survival necessities. Give individuals the right knowledge, let them make their own decision. France, on the other hand, is afraid of doing so since they, like many money-making industries, greed, I'm talking about, stand to lose. Is this, again, about freedom, secularism, and liberty, or is it about money, power, and with women as marketing objects? As they say, sex sells. And I have showed, like if you look at Instagram, the most popular women influencers, sex sells. Basically, they fit under that category. So this raises concerns about whether France views women as human beings or objects for manipulation and control. People, as I said in that article about regarding makeup, we're being poisoned every day. But if we look at how freedom of speech is being used and being misrepresented to the society, we're not just being poisoned every day physically with the makeup on our bodies. Or if we look at the makeup of how people are doing a makeover on reason, doing a makeover on some of our subconscious understanding and our social understanding, we're also mentally, emotionally, and socially being poisoned through these manipulation tactics under the guise of freedom of expression. So France has a cultural war, but not with Muslims. France has a cultural war with itself. These two pit bulls is like the shadow fighting, it's the ego. This is, again, France is really at war, not with Muslims, but with itself. There is a fear of Islamic understanding of things and the facts that Muslims and what they carry with them, their understanding of certain social and subconscious issues and how these things play out. They're afraid of that being on the table. One thing to note about individuals who deny the truth is they will claim They don't have signs. Like I said, if we can't see God, we can't see, X, Y, Z. So they will claim a lack of evidence. And if God was to send, sign upon sign upon sign upon sign, they'll keep arguing that, they don't have sufficient evidence. This is, again, the manifestation. But if we sit still and just listen to those, again, who claim that, this is why they reject, for example, the truth, and just watch them outside that particular discussion that you're having in other areas of their life. You just keep listening and observing and let them speak for themselves. If one studies their lives, they readily accept everything that inclines or resonates with their ego based on conjecture, without science, based on disinformation, misinformation, magic. So in fact, if you spread a slander or you spread a disinformation, even the Quran highlights that for us to reflect on. Here's what God is trying to bring our attention to when we are reflecting. They are avid listeners to falsehood, devourers of what is unlawful. We're talking about here greed, and then again, a love of falsehood. So if they come to you, O Muhammad, judge between them or turn away from them. If you turn away from them, never will they harm you at all. If you judge between them with justice. But notice again the relationship between greed and listeners to falsehood. So on the outside, they manifest, inhibition of free speech and, freedom of expression. And it's not just related, again, to non-Muslims, but even in Muslim societies, there's also greed there as well. But you will find, again, these individuals who tend to deny the truth out of greed. If God was to send falsehood their way, like a test, like a Samiri would be one, an event where the emissions are greater than the facts, you will find that they will engage again in conjecture and they will spread distortion and they will be like on the front lines, literally front and center, amplifying falsehood. In the time, for example, of if we look into the Quran, the Pharaoh, he was willing to accept magic. However, when Prophet Moses came clear, remember the verse I said, he came with clear signs that he could measure, he was not willing to accept. A lot of individuals will go after Tony Robbins, for example, and they want to face their fears. They claim that they do this kind of walk on fire. So they'll be looking for things that if they really wanted to face their fears, they can go and deal with the issue of where you have power and where you have influence. The United States gives tremendous amount of money as well as veto and power and defense for the state of Israel, and they're engaging in apartheid. You want to face your fears there. That's where you need to face your fears. But going after these gimmicks or Kool-Aid, as one person who attended the event for the hot cold ritual goes horribly wrong by Tony Robbins, she said that she called herself out for drinking the Kool-Aid. She ended up getting hurt where it was not necessary for her, or even a need for her to get hurt in that particular situation. So again, we look for magic, for supernatural solutions, or Kool-Aid disguised as inspiration and motivation to escape reality. Call it meditation, inspiration, motivation, but as the Inside Edition video shows, you can go look for Inside Edition. Tony Robbins, goes, ritual goes wrong. And you can look at the video and the description. God gives us many opportunities to face reality and overcome our fears by turning to him, but we prefer the escape route, the magic. We want to overcome our fear. We can speak up again against apartheid in Israel or human rights abuses where we have power and influence. When we reject to do so, we incline to these type of foolish type delusions and games the image of ourselves overcoming our fears. Again, it's always that image versus the reality of us overcoming our fears. So during the first coming of Jesus, this is again from the Quran, this people struggled to believe sign after sign, sign after sign, miracle after miracle, which they witnessed. Despite numerous signs, when God tested their hearts, they readily believed conjecture about Jesus upon a peace, which they did not witness. The omissions were greater than the facts. So again, remember I talked about where things are clear, fundamental, there's things are not clear. So individuals who tend to like there's like the bees and there's the flies, instead of like being attracted to the honey, they were attracted to, if you will, the garbage of the conjecture. I'm not now calling out Christians now, because people here received, when we engaged Christians in now regarding the issue of Jesus, they were not the ones there at that time being tested with this test. They're here, and our conversation or back and forth common argument with them is that verse that I mentioned about, are you sure Jesus said what you claim to have said? So this is what I'm referring to here when I'm talking about that. I'm talking about the individuals at the time who received that message. They were questioning. And then when the conjecture or reality, an event took place, they did not witness the full facts of the situation. They readily followed falsehood. It's the same thing for Muslims during the time of Ali. And I'll mention that when I get into Cade and disagreement. When a situation came about, an event came about, Uthman and somebody impersonated him. Likewise, certain individuals in the community, but here you value the companions who came immediately full force, and they protected the message, the divine message, from facing that distortion campaign. And God chose them for that reason of they were able to be used to well guard that message so it traveled to the next generation. But likewise, Muslims were tested, and there were individuals who heart listened to falsehood, and they were trying, the Khawarij and others, attempting to, again, distort the message. And tremendous, again, gratitude to those who stood the test, and they were able to immediately verify, clarify, and confirm before taking that event and following conjecture or following disinformation or following misinformation or distortion campaign, and keeping the message well guarded. It's not, again, pointing fingers at any faith, but again, nurturing reason, the importance of verifying, of clarifying, of confirming. These are faculties and issues of reason that we need to look into. And then how at times individuals that create the problems are the same people that are putting themselves in position to solve the problem, literally to keep us in a collision with each other, because what's inside of them is they're at war with themselves, and they want to, what comes out of them is war. Again, what comes out of them is war. So they're at war within themselves, because they're constantly denying the truth every time a sign comes, they're denying the truth. And so they only come out outside of them, inside of them is attracted to what's outside of them. So they're attracted to falsehood. They're attracted to this information, whatever will help them to turn the truth into a lie. And so that's what they will be attracted to, and that's what they will be trying to implant, and that's what they will try to push forth. And we need to understand how reason works and how reason, for example, is nurtured, so that first with ourselves we ask for pure hearts, and we work to make sure that we are not engaged in these processes. And we recognize that when we are going to be tested, it's going to be coming through disinformation campaigns, slander campaigns. And if we easily run after it, this says a lot about what's in our heart and about, and hopefully hopefully we'll repent, but if we don't, about our final destination. So I thank you very much for this presentation. I hope you found it beneficial. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.